what exact role do you see elders playing in your ideal image in your mind's eye?
Yeah, an elder has to have reached a certain level of maturity that an elder is like Siri on your phone or your GPS. No matter how many times you call Siri, Siri just says, mm-hmm. It never gets upset with you because there's some difficulty. The GPS doesn't get upset with you because you're lost. At your next turn, make a U-turn. It doesn't say, you stupid idiot, I gave you the directions one time. What's the matter with you? It doesn't do that. So an elder knows that things happen. So you can't get upset in beating people up because something happens. If they're doing the best they can, what else would you require of them? I know you're not in charge of this Zoom technology. There's a satellite someplace. The Ghana network is always unpredictable. So what help would it be for me to scream at you and say, I can't take this anymore. This is the stupidest thing I ever heard of. And how you could call yourself going to gather information. You can't even set up a call. But I know that this technology is not within your total control. So if an elder hasn't developed the capacity to see that it's not helping a situation for you to be a raving maniac, then you're not really mature enough to be an example, because what youth is going to validate and appreciate what you're doing? And all you're doing is having an old person's temper tantrum all the time. So it's not going to work. But an ideal village or an ideal community, we have to understand what it is that we're talking about. See, and most of the time, we've become so comfortable with making up stuff that we don't know that the things we're talking about have their own definitions too. So when we say a village, we say, if we accept that it takes a village to raise a child, and most people can appreciate that concept, even though they're not talking about exactly what we're talking about. But the concept is easy to understand. Everybody says, oh yeah, that's it. That feels real good. It feels right. I get that. But if you say that, you know that it takes a culture to maintain the village that it takes to raise the child. So now we're talking about something that most people think is song and dance, music, dress, and hairstyles. They think that's culture. You're talking about culture, they think that's what you're talking about, but that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about all the belief systems that relate to the functionality of that culture. What are all the beliefs that you have that will sustain and comprise that culture that you have reduced to just red, black, and green, locks, Dinker symbols, and that to you, and certain beats and rhythms and this, that to you is the culture that you're talking about. So you don't know anything about culture. So the culture that's needed to sustain the village that it takes to raise the children, we don't have. We don't have any of that. We don't even know what we're talking about. So the culture has 3 or 4 basic functions. Number one, culture teaches people how to interpret reality. What is the spiritual system that teaches you what is going on around you that you're part of? There's a whole system. You have the traditional system that has been supplanted by Christianity, Catholicism, things. So these are systems that you don't even understand as part of the culture of the village that you say is needed to raise the child. So that's not even in your mind. So culture has to teach people how to act. So the biggest problem that African people have, Black people, particularly in the diaspora, particularly in the US, we're all out of order. Nobody knows how to act. Everybody does whatever they think they want to do. The culture teaches people how to act. What are the rules? What are the protocols? What are the procedures? How do you say thank you? And yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. How do you say please? How do you say, I really am hopeful that you'll give me the opportunity to do this. And I really thank you for the opportunity that you gave me. All these social protocols that would be create the behavioral expectations. If there's nothing in place to demonstrate that and to hold people accountable for it, you don't have a village and a culture that's sustaining that will raise children. Everybody's making up their own rules. You ask somebody, why'd you do that? They said, because I felt like it. Well, nobody does things because they feel like it. That's not an explanation. So the ideal village, and what we see when we come here in villages, villages have a very intricate system of protocols, procedures, expectations that everybody knows what they are. And for the most part, everybody follows them, which explains why you don't see police everywhere. Because there's a set of accepted practices, rules, and consequences and reminders that teach people how to act. So in the US, we don't have that. So people can say whatever they want to say, you don't have that. Because if you did, the young people wouldn't be just doing whatever they think they want to do. And some of those rules are instilling in young people the relationship you have with those senior to you. So you're learning how to appreciate elderhood because there's a certain protocol that you are expected to exhibit with anyone older than you. Even if it's your sister, that's your senior sister, you have to give her respect because she's older than you. And she has to give respect to her auntie, who is her junior mother, because she's older than you. So age is revered as an important construct that we associate with growth, development, respect, privileges, status. So we assume that if you're in a place where you're learning things, the older you get, the better you get. There's no other thing. You live longer, so you learn more than the person that's 7 years old couldn't possibly know what you know. They haven't lived long enough. They haven't had enough. The village hasn't been nurturing them long enough for them to grow. So they don't have any expectation that they would know what you know. So they don't act like that. It would be disrespectful to act like that when we know you're just a child. How could you know this? So just be quiet and listen. You don't know any of these things. You're only 6, you're only 7. So what are we talking about? You're debating me? You're 7 years old, you're debating me? How crazy does that sound?
Okay, I'm still here. It's just my phone kind of disconnected. So we're jumping
Okay.
around here. Don't worry. But you were mentioning. So what do you think about children bringing in information? And because they say like a child is coming from the place that an elder is going to. So what about the new? You said a 7-year-old might be having an argument with an elder, someone who knows more, but what if that 7-year-old kind of has a different understanding as to where the world is going? Like if we you know what I mean? Like not really the world, but how we are evolving and kind of the part that they will play in the future.
I got your question, and it's not bad, but let me finish the elements of the culture first.
Right.
So the culture that it takes to maintain the village that it takes to raise the children. I'll go back since we got a little bit bifurcated. First is the culture teaches you how to interpret reality, your spiritual systems. Then it teaches you how to act so that you know how to act. The third thing culture has to do is to, and this is where rites of passage comes in. As we talk about rites of passage, this is where it will come in. The culture has to transfer the knowledge of how to interpret reality and how to act to the next generation. Rites of passage is a process that transfers the knowledge of how to interpret reality, how to act to the next generation. So if you don't have that, you're asking people to learn how to act on their own or learn how to interpret things based on whatever they think it makes sense. So that's three aspects. Fourth, the culture has to determine how are people going to sustain themselves? What's the economy that's going to allow you to sustain yourself so that you can have children, feed children, clothe children, house children? What is the culture going to do to sustain itself? So here, as you know, we have fishing villages, you have weaving villages. So they're sustaining themselves from the interaction with nature through fish, farming, cloth making, weaving. So that's the economy of the village. That's how it's sustaining itself. Then a village has to figure out, a culture has to figure out how to protect itself. You know, we had the villages had the Asafo troops, which was like the military component of a village. Once you become colonized and once the colonials leave and they leave you with the remnants of the infrastructure of government, you have the police department, you have the army. And so you don't need to protect yourself. So the Asafo role is eroded. It becomes something else, community service projects. So that's culture has to do all of these things. Now to your other question is a good question, but it's only necessary as we relate to the arguing part of it. So a child would never debate with an adult, but there are myriad ways to find out what children know and the great ideas they have. Because as you watch them, you can identify the tendencies that you see that an elder or a community would know is their responsibility to nurture that. So an inquisitive child is not a magical discovery. An inquisitive child, you can see from the time they're pre-language, they seem curious. They seem interested in certain things. It's the community's job to nurture those. And then you engage the child and say, well, Jamila, I know this is way over your head because you're only 7 years old, but tell me, what do you think about water purification? Because you know that the child is showing you a tendency, if you just watch the child has a tendency to be inquisitive. They're into everything. They're taking things apart that they don't know nothing about. You know, that's a curious spirit that the child is carrying. So the child shouldn't have to argue with you because you're presenting the child with things that you know will nurture their curiosity. They're already demonstrating that. So it's only the manner in which I'm talking that a child would not argue with an adult because that doesn't make any sense. But the adult's job is to glean from and nurture the growth of the child, that you can see areas that they have a certain tendency or predisposition to be engaged in. So if a child is always drawing something, you still hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. If a child that you can see yourself, you don't have to ask the child anything. The child is busy taking pieces of cloth and trying to make something.
Right.
Nobody's asking them to do that. So you'd have to be blind or cruel not to realize, well, why don't I give this child some cloth and a needle and thread and show them how to sew something? See if they're interested. They're trying to make something. So let me facilitate what it appears that they're trying to do already. Right. And so that you're nurturing the growth that you see the potential for. So the child wouldn't have to argue with you about it if you're observant and you care. If a child is playing music with sticks, they listen to something and they're trying to copy it. So here's a child that if you gave them something that was a legitimate instrument, you have a reason to think they might be interested in it. This is not even a mystery. In my village here, you know Nana Duakwa, right?
I believe, no, I don't think so.
Oh, the chief of my village. You've been here before.
I don't think I've been to your village, to be honest.
Oh, well, you have to come. So anyway, you know, the chiefs come from the royal family. Mm-hmm. You know, the structure of chieftaincy is a matrilineal succession, but it comes from the royal family. Now, what do you think the likelihood is that right now today, the chief of my village doesn't know the people in the royal family?
Doesn't know them personally?
Yeah, say he doesn't know who they are. You think that's possible?
Maybe he knows of them, but maybe not personally.
No, he knows all of them.
Okay.
You think if he knows all of them, you think he knows the children?
Yes.
So he knows right now today of the children that are in the royal family, plus those that are going to be born that haven't been born yet.
Wow.
That the males of the royal family, one of them is going to be his successor.
Right.
He knows that right. He knows that right now. So when he sees these children in the royal family, do you think part of what's on his mind is to say, which one of these are going to be the best candidate to succeed me? He's doing that all the time. He knows the candidates that exist right now. They're only like 12 years old. They don't know it, but he knows it already. So if you knew who was likely candidates to succeed you, what would you do while they're 10, 11, 12 years old? What would you do?
Definitely help them to find where they will excel best, and also get them on like a certain kind of like a plan. Like they should be coming together and consecutively, like a consistent, repetitive kind of kind of like a school, basically, right? But not school what we know it to be. But
it's informal. It's an informal. Right. The chief tells me that, unbeknownst to him, the chief that he's succeeding, when he was a little child, the chief took him everywhere he went. Mm. He had no idea why he was going. He took him everywhere he went, all while he's growing up. So when the time came that his predecessor transitioned, he was the best candidate to succeed him. And he's doing the same thing with the little boys that are here right now. He's nurturing them so that when the time comes to select his successor, the one that is most desirable will be the one that he's put the most time, energy, and development into. So you look at all the character traits and you say, and one day he told me, he said, you see that little boy right there? He's the most likely person to succeed me. He's patient. He's thoughtful. He doesn't get rattled. He doesn't fly off the handle. He thinks things through. And so he and I have put that boy through UCC. He's graduated. So that when the time comes, an elder or a leader has made sure that he's tried to develop the successor so that the process can continue. Right. That's a wise person. Now, if you don't do anything and you just are surprised because somebody dies and there's been no thought in your succession, then you get whatever you get because you haven't done your job. You've just been preoccupied by, I'm a chief, and so I'm all that. So I'll just go until the wheels fall off, and then they just do whatever they do. But nobody lives forever. So you have to, a wise person realizes what this means. So I have to do something to preserve something. Otherwise, what I've built may go for nothing. So that's, I'm hoping I've answered the question you have about the young person. So we look around all the time. You can look around at people that you see every day. You could pick, if you go to a school, you could pick a girl in the school that said, now this is a girl that if I just instilled and put something into this person, I can see the potential is already there. Some support, but I can see they have the disposition, they have the work ethic, they have the tolerance, they have the patience, they have the persistence. You can see all of that already. So all I need to do is stimulate this growth by doing small things. And you can see these things. So I get upset with my teachers in my school because and you can do this with yoga too right now. You know exactly what I'm talking about. After a month of school, I can ask my teachers, well, tell me about your students. I can come in your class for 5 minutes and I can look around. I can find out all kinds of things about your students. They're not paying attention to you. This one's fooling around. This one's looking out the window. This one's playing with toys. And you tell me you've been here a month, 5 hours a day, and you haven't seen anything. So you're negligent. Mm-hmm. You can spend 5 minutes, you get people in a yoga class, say, well, you really want to do yoga? And say, yeah, I've always wanted to do this. And in 5 minutes, you can look around and say, well, only 3 people in here really want to do this. Mm-hmm. There's only 3 people that's actually attempting to do what I'm telling you. Mm-hmm. So you've been talking about doing this. You would like to do this, but you're not prepared to do this. So you want me to spend time with you as you complain about how awkward this is, how uncomfortable the mat is, and all this stuff. So you don't really want to do yoga. You want to talk about doing yoga. That's what you want to do. We're not talking about doing yoga. We're actually going to do yoga. So if you really don't want to do yoga, I really don't need to talk to you about yoga. You can do that online. Mm-hmm. So you can see things in people that you could be wrong, but you can make a calculated assessment based on your observation. If you've had enough experience and you're wise enough and you understand the dynamics well enough, you can select people way ahead of time. And you say, well, this one, there's a good chance this person could succeed at this because there's no guarantee. But they exhibit most of the elements needed to do this. Maybe it won't turn out like that, but there's a very good chance that it will turn out because they have everything they need in order to succeed at it. I just need to give them some direction, help coach them, encourage them. They're already motivated, so I don't have to do that. And so you can do this with children too. And to your other point, if the spiritual system is right, which it used to be, now it's a whole different thing, but it used to be. So even before the child is born, the people in ancient traditional times knew what the child was coming for. So now it becomes easier to say, well, this child is coming, this is going to be the reincarnation of so-and-so. So all we have to do is pick up where they left off. The child doesn't know that, but we can recognize these things that our forecast tells us this. Our forecasting today has been reduced to identifying the gender of a newborn. That's where we are. You say, well, I know this. I know this. You're going to be happy because you always wanted a girl. We know it's going to be a girl. And we could almost say, our ancestors would say, okay, big deal. You know how simple it is to know that? So what does that mean? You're patting yourself on the back. You don't know why the girl is coming. You don't know what you have to do. You don't know the girl's mission. You don't know how you're going to do these things. And you're all excited because you got a 2-month head start and you know you're going to paint the room blue. That's all you know. You're going to paint the room blue and put up certain curtains, and you're real happy. But you don't know anything about this child. And so now you're independent if you're an egomaniac or you're disgruntled with your life, you take the child who has a mission, but you want to use the child to validate what you were unable to do. So you want the child to, you want to live through the child's accomplishment, and that's not even the child's purpose. You want the child to be such and such because that's what you want it to be, but you didn't quite make it. So now you want to put the child on that path, but that's not the child's path. So you're ruining the child. The child resents every minute of this because they don't feel like it's for them anyway. They're not good at it. They're not good at it. And now you're browbeating them because they're not naturally capable of doing this, but you want it so bad. So now you're going to put them through hell to make them a track star or make them a musician or make them a gymnast, whatever it is, make them a singer, but they can't sing. So you give them singing lessons, but they can't get it. But you want it so bad, you say, yes, you can get it. You can sing, you sound beautiful, but the child knows they don't sound beautiful. The teachers take your money because they're in business to make money. They know the child is never going to be able to sing either. We get voice lessons. We get lessons for this, lessons for that. But so the child is not living the life that the child was supposed to live based on what they came to do. So, but at earlier times, we had a better sense of that because your spiritual system gave you insight and information that we don't get anymore. So these things were not guesswork. Now that would be the ideal community. You know these people that are returning, you know what they're returning for, so you get prepared for them, not just their room. So the naming ceremonies that take place here, they hearken back to the traditional time where you knew what the child was coming for. So you gave the child a name that reflected what they were coming for so that the community would all know what they're supposed to be doing. So it becomes pretty easy to nurture their development because their name is telling you what they're on the path to do. We don't have that now. So if your name tells me everything that you're supposed to become, it's not difficult for me to know how I can help develop you. Anything that will contribute to what your name says, we know is beneficial for your development. So anybody in the village can do it. They say, well, Jamila's going to be a open heart surgeon. That's what she's going to become. So anybody in the village that knows that is thinking of how to help you get to that point. So when you're running around and you're playing with sticks and things that could injure your hands, which are needed for surgery, people will know to caution you and say, Jamila, you know, your future is all different than that. So you can't play recklessly with your hands because you need your hands for very, very important things. So you have to be much more careful. Anybody can tell you that.
Right.
And as you get older, they can tell you why. Then you can understand why they've done and said what they've said and done and how it's beneficial to you. So that's all the integrated components of a community and a culture. So in the ideal world, and when you have that question, in the ideal world question, it means in a world where you don't have things preventing that.
Right.
Like you have all the components there, but there's no such thing as the ideal world. So in
your imagination.
Yeah, right. In your imagination, the functional world is what I've just described. Because if you have all these components, everybody knows that, for lack of a better simple expression, is shit happens.
Right.
In the ideal world, shit happens. In the ideal world, shit happens. So as long as you have the components in place, you can adapt to, address, and resolve the shit that happens in an ideal world. So you have the built-in safeguards. In the ideal world, we wouldn't have to keep getting back onto this Zoom call.
Right.
No things wouldn't be happening. So
True.
In the ideal world, we're equipped with the maturity, the humility, the patience and persistence. Because you could have texted me back and say, this is too frustrating, so let's just set it up for another time. You could have said that. And I would have said, okay, so we'll see when we can arrange it. But you had the persistence to say, well, the recording is still going. Nana's on the call. He's not upset. So I'll just put it on again and we'll start from there. But you could have given up. So in the ideal world, the people don't give up. In the ideal world, the people don't get frustrated to say they throw in the towel. In the ideal world, people don't get angry about things that is nobody's fault. They just keep focused on, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to get a recording. We're trying to go through some questions. We're trying to get something that you as a young person or the next generation will find useful and share with other people in your age group. And maybe it will do some good. Maybe it won't do anything. But we can't answer that question until we first get it.
Right.
Once we have it, we can field test it. And if people say, well, that's dumb, I don't think that's worth anything, you say, okay, that's fine. So we did the best we could do. That's all we could do, is put it together, present it, we got it, we packaged it, and here it is. Use it for what you can use it for, get what you can get, what you don't want, throw in the trash, and we keep on moving, because that's the way life is. So, but you could have quit on this because you say, this is too frustrating for me and I don't like it and it's terrible and the Ghana network is terrible and I should have never left Canada and I wouldn't have had these problems. I'd have Wi-Fi that will work all the time. I said, well, yeah, all that may be true. But you could be in Canada and the Wi-Fi doesn't work either. So,
exactly.
so
Exactly.
You're here now. So we do what we can do, and we trust that it's going to be sufficient. And if it isn't, we're going to revisit it. That's all.
It will be sufficient. I'm even gonna cut you right there just because it is gonna cut one. We're gonna have to go out and come back in, but that's just to ask. We have two more questions left that are based
Okay.
around rites of passage.
Okay.
And what you had said in the previous, like what you said about the elder spending time with the youth brings in the next questions I have on around wealth of rites of passage, but it is
Okay.
gonna cut. So I'm gonna save that recording and then you can come back in literally in after 2 seconds or 30
Okay.
seconds.